Ukraine and the US have agreed a deal that is expected to give Washington access to Ukraine's mineral deposits. The US calls it a signal of its commitment to Ukrainian sovereignty. The Trump administration had long pushed for the deal under terms that were initially seen as extortionate in Kyiv. Now both sides are hailing the revised agreement they signed in Washington on Wednesday.
After months of tense negotiations, Ukraine and the U.S. ink a minerals deal. Washington has long demanded compensation for the billions in aid it's given to Kyiv. Now, the Trump administration has secured preferential access to Ukraine's mineral resources and an equal share with Ukraine's government in exploiting them. The U.S. says the deal is a message to Russia.
Today's agreement signals clearly to Russian leadership that the Trump administration is committed to a peace process centered on a free, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine over the long term.
According to the Ukrainian Geological Survey, the country has large deposits of minerals. These include graphite and lithium used in batteries for electric vehicles, and titanium and zirconium used in aerospace. There are also deposits of rare earth metals. Ukraine says the deal is a win-win.
This is a strategic deal for the creation of an investment partnership fund. It's truly an equal and good international deal on joint investment in the development and restoration of Ukraine between the governments of the United States and Ukraine.
Ukraine managed to negotiate away several punishing terms from earlier drafts. The deal doesn't give U.S. businesses special privileges over European investors that could hamper Ukraine's EU membership bid, and it won't be asked to compensate the U.S. for its previous assistance. Harsher terms were on the table when Zelensky visited Trump in February. The meeting was a diplomatic disaster. President Volodymyr Zelensky wanted security guarantees from the U.S. That's still off the table, but Trump says the new deal will discourage hostilities.
It's also good for them because you'll have an American presence at the site, Chris, and the American presence will, I think, keep a lot of bad actors out of the country, or certainly out of the area where we're doing the digging.
Signing the deal may have been the easy part. Some of the resources lie in Russian-occupied territory. Ukraine says those reserves are worth 350 billion euros.
So when will the US see financial payback for this deal with Ukraine? This is our Kyiv correspondent, Connolly's take.
Not anytime soon seems to be the answer. There is a lot of speculation, a lot of things that are still unclear about this deal. We've had very different readouts from the Ukrainian and the American sides about how this is actually going to work. But it seems, this is what the Ukrainians are saying at least, that basically this fund where all the income from giving licenses to develop these rare earth metals and also critical metals, that will be reinvested in Ukraine basically for the first 10 years. So that basically at the earliest, the US is going to see some kind of return on this 10 years down the line, if at all these licenses are sold and actually this investment happens. Because right now you have to ask yourself, what international company is going to invest serious amounts of money into these projects that are going to take years, if not decades, to actually bring profit when Ukraine's geopolitical future is so uncertain. So lots of question marks, but certainly a sense here in Kyiv that this is about giving Donald Trump a win, something that he can sell as something he's achieved in his first 100 days, and try and keep Trump on side during these negotiations where obviously he's been pretty negative towards Volodymyr Zelensky, to the Ukrainian side, and very keen to find explanations for Russia's behavior and to kind of let them off the hook.
DW's Connolly there in Kyiv. And for another perspective, let's bring in military analyst Marina Miron from the Defence Studies Department at King's College London. Marina, do you see this as a good deal for Ukraine?
Good day, Gerhard. Well, at present, we don't have a very specific deal. If we compare as a deal that was signed by the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko yesterday, it is about 12 pages in length, as opposed to what we have seen in February, which was 90 pages in length. So what is being defined in this new deal, there are a lot of question marks on how this is going to work and how this is going to be operationalized, meaning that the next big hurdle will be after, if the Ukrainian parliament ratifies this document, that technical descriptor to how this is going to work and which obligations each party has. And this, I think, will be key in terms of being able to assess how workable is this deal.
Now, do you see anything in this deal that would help end the war and prevent a future invasion by Russia?
As Nick Connolly has said, the returns on investment for this deal might take a while, and the Ukrainian side has expressed cautious skepticism regarding the economic value and the security value of this deal, because this deal does not include any explicit security guarantees. And the Ukrainian deputy prime minister expressed the hope that the United States might continue military assistance to Ukraine, specifically in form of air defenses. But the good thing for the United States, and this paper actually benefits the United States in the first place, is that there is no explicit obligation on the part of the United States to do anything in that specific area. So I don't think that at present, even if it was implemented today, that there would be a change on the battlefield, simply because you first need to do a geological survey, to find investors who would be willing to take upon them the risk. And I'm not even talking about the part of the territories being controlled by Russia right now, where some of those minerals are, but just the viability of developing those large-scale projects and finding a market niche, and the market which is being controlled by China, is it all worth it? And so there are a lot of questions. Therefore, I don't think it has anything to do with the military operations and the war going on right now as it is per se, and I don't think there will be a change.
Now, there definitely appears to be a return of goodwill between the two sides after the very difficult Oval Office meeting 2 months ago. Might that be as important as anything else?
Well, I think it is more on the diplomatic level that you have the importance of this deal, and specifically for the Trump administration to be able to show something to his domestic constituent population, because his ratings are falling and he needs to justify the US involvement somehow. However, for Ukraine, what is interesting is that it's not President Zelensky signing the deal. It's the deputy prime minister signing the deal, which calls into question what is going to happen, even if President Zelensky signed it, what is going to happen after the elections when the new administration comes. And Russia is an example of where in mid-90s such deals didn't work, because many assets were nationalized under Putin. So it can go pear-shaped, certainly. And what are the mechanisms to guarantee it doesn't happen under the future administration? So there are a lot of question marks. For now, we will wait and see what happens.
The military analyst Marina Miron from King's College London. Thank you, Marina. Now let's get the Russian perspective on this. Our former Moscow bureau chief Juri Rescheto is reporting from Riga after the Kremlin kicked DW out of Russia. Juri, after all the goodwill between the White House and the Kremlin, the first agreement coming out of the war is not with Russia but Ukraine. How is Moscow reacting?
So far, Gerhard, there has been no official reaction from the Kremlin, but I'm sure that any political rapprochement between Kyiv and Washington is viewed in Moscow with anger, suspicion, and even malicious joy, let's say, in Russia, even if there is no actual damage for Ukraine. We see this in the social media of former Russian President Medvedev. He has posted that Trump has destroyed the Kyiv regime, as Medvedev calls the Ukrainian leadership, so that US aid could be repaid with national prosperity and even the disappearance of Ukraine. Besides that, Gerhard, we see reports from the Russian military about their own territorial gains, losses of the Ukrainian army, and further missile strikes by the Russians on Ukraine, and on the one hand, and drone attacks by the Ukrainians on Russia on the other. So, agreement or not, the war goes on.
So now there's disagreement, plus word that the US Senate will impose, quote, bone-crushing sanctions, including huge tariffs on major Russian exports, if Vladimir Putin does not get serious about peace. Do you think it makes Putin nervous?
I assume that Putin is not nervous as long as his army is successful in Ukraine, and it seems to be right now. But even the Russian army is not all powerful, and the Russian society is not forever happy with the war, and the Russian economy has also been suffering under sanctions. That is why Putin thinks pragmatically. He sees Trump as someone who will approach him and make some concessions, and he is taking the opportunity. Now the tariffs or potential new sanctions you mentioned may give Putin some food for thought, so to say, and possibly annoy him much more than the agreement with the Ukraine, as the Russians are negotiating with the Americans on other subjects, on trade, flight connections, cooperation in the Arctic, and so on and so on. Yes, Trump's agreement with Zelensky could be upsetting for Putin, but who knows what agreements Putin will sign with Putin tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. But right now, yes, the threat from the senator could be annoying for Putin about tariffs.
Now, in a few days, Russia will celebrate the 80th anniversary of its victory over Nazi Germany. Do you think this agreement between the US and Ukraine will put a damper on the mood?
Well, Victory Day is on May 9, is the most important national holiday in Russia, and this year also marks the 80th anniversary. And there is even speculation as to whether Trump might come to Moscow for the military parade. For Putin, every foreign state guest is not only a sign of solidarity with Russia as a winner in the World War II, but also a symbol of recognition of the Kremlin's policy above all its war against Ukraine. For the past 3 years, Russian propaganda has deliberately linked this war to the World War II, because from the Russian point of view, from Russian perspective, this is a war against the supposed threat of Nazis in Ukraine. And because the significance of the Day of Victory for Russian state ideology is so great, I think agreement with Ukraine or not, it's unlikely to influence Victory Day on May 9.
CW correspondent Juri Rescheto there. Thanks, Juri.
For more on this, we want to speak with Fabrice Pothier. He's a policy planner for NATO. He now focuses on foreign policy and strategic issues for Rasmussen Global Consulting and joins me from Madrid. Always good to see you, Fabrice. What do you think of this deal? How significant is it? Is it as big as the White House has made it out to be?
Well, obviously, I've not seen the very final agreement, but having seen the previous versions, I think we're clearly in a better place, or at least from a Ukrainian point of view, than in the first version, where, for example, there was a recognition, some form of recognition of a kind of debt that Ukraine owed to United States for their contributions to the war effort. That's no longer there. There is also in this new agreement, this final agreement, recognition of the compatibility of the agreement with the EU integration process, which obviously is an important matter for Ukraine, for the EU. So I think overall it's not as bad as it looked first, but obviously it does not clarify the central question which your correspondent was mentioning, which is there a form of US guarantee here, or is it just a contractual guarantee, which frankly with Donald Trump does not have a great track record of meeting his contractual obligations as a businessman.
Yeah, we heard President Trump say, we want something for our efforts, and he's got a financial deal in front of him finally. But former President Joe Biden and European leaders long suggested that was maintaining world order by keeping Russia in check. Does this deal help that cause?
I think this is a very typical symbol of Donald Trump's high level of transactionalism, where he thinks relations between countries, especially partners, are defined by business bottom line. And obviously it misses the bigger point here, as you were mentioning, is how is it keeping the United States, the government, not just its companies, in Ukraine as a guarantor of a future sovereign and independent Ukraine? And I think here the United States is dodging that question, and it kind of assumed that the Europeans are going to deliver, but the bottom line is the Europeans can only deliver some serious security guarantees if they feel they have some form of backup from the United States. So we are back to square one, and I think we have still not solved that.
Yeah, do you see anything, if you squint and look really carefully, do you see something in the deal that would help end the war and prevent any future invasion by Russia?
Frankly, I don't think to have businessmen and to have extraction projects across Ukraine is going to be deterring Vladimir Putin. If not, I think all the investments that were made before 2022, before the full-scale invasion, will have had some deterring effect. That's not the case. So. And like your correspondent was saying, I mean, this whole deal is based on the premise that Ukraine is sitting on huge deposits of rare earth, which is on paper probably true, but if you look at the capital intensiveness of extracting those rare earth, which are not located in the easiest part of the territory, but also are not necessarily the highest density deposit, it's not necessarily such a good business deal for US companies to extract. So I think it's more symbolic. It's a way for Donald Trump to feel that he has had a win, that he was validated in his view that the US needed to be reimbursed. But I don't think it's going to fundamentally change the economic future of Ukraine.
Looking for more silver linings, I guess. Let's go back 2 months to the White House visit by Zelensky when he was ostensibly there to sign this deal in February. Was it fortunate in hindsight for Ukraine that he did not sign it then?
Well, clearly, at least what we could see of the previous versions, they were more, I think, closer to a kind of banana republic type of agreement, which was deeply offensive to Ukraine, especially given that Ukraine is fighting for its independence and sovereignty. And when you could read the first version of this agreement, they were, in a way, denying Ukraine kind of equal sovereign rights to the United States. And there was this notion that somehow Ukraine owed hundreds of billions of dollars to United States, which frankly is a fantasy, because as you know, the countries that have contributed most to the war effort in Ukraine, outside Ukraine, are the country of the European Union. The United States has contributed up to 150 billion euro, but the $300+ billion figure that was mentioned in the original version is just a Trump fantasy here. So I think it's good that Zelensky resisted the signature of this deal, because it would have been undermining in a way Ukraine's sovereignty, when actually everything we've done, including the United States over the past 3 years, is to try to secure Ukraine's sovereignty. That was the very sad irony of this deal.
Former NATO policy expert Fabrice Pothier, now CEO of Rasmussen Global. Thanks so much for your time as always. Good to see you.
Thank you.